Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to another Warrior Stream. Today's topic is a pretty interesting one, a pretty good one. I tend to be a little biased. I think I pretty much say that every week, but this week is no different, which is good news. Before I get into that, let me take care of some housekeeping. That's what they refer to it as. It's basically talking about all the reasons why I'm always doing these shows. And it is to connect with like-minded people who want to take the alliance with me to another step, another level. If you guys are not getting my emails, they're free. I send them out every morning. Some days, multiple emails, always pertaining to the things that I tend to talk about, the things that I'm offering, things I'm interested in, etc. The link is in the description. If you don't see the link there, if you're listening to this and can't exactly hit a button on a screen, you could always go to masterchimletter.com, and the opt-in for the email list is there. All relevant links are down in the descriptions, though. Right now, I am streaming on my main YouTube channel and two Facebook pages, the Justin Garcia Facebook page and the Master Chim Facebook page. So, all that being said, let's get it popping. All right, first off, what do we got here? Jesse, what's up, my man? Good to see you. Yarn Saxa, good to see you. Caceres, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a bit. Hope all is well. Love and hugs to the family, of course, as always. Yarn Saxa says she is excited about this topic. As am I. So the topic of today, right, the title for today's Warrior Stream is the Zen of Not Being a Bitch. The Zen of Not Being a Bitch. I think there are some easy strategies that every man can implement, and women. Like, listen, you guys know I coach men. I don't coach women, but women are always welcome to my talks. And usually the women that show up to mine are the ones that are pretty fucking squared away, right? So that being said, absolutely feel free to apply this to your life as well. All the ladies in the house. In this morning's email, which I usually do for Wednesday mornings, I write the email, leaving the link for the show and a little bit of some promo, for what I'm going to be discussing. And I just want to read through what I had written today. What separates the man who becomes stronger through life's adversities and the man who crumbles before it? Is there a difference between mimicking crusher-like habits and being one? And I will use that to segue into some material. Before we do that, let me see what's up to everybody else. Aaron, good to see you. As always, Jamie, glad to see you and Aaron are still, showing up, hanging out. Like it's a little anomalous because you guys have been a couple, married couple, happy, long time. Everything's still working out. We are the trendsetters, right? We are old school in that way, and I'm glad you guys are still holding it down. Johnny Groob in the house. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. My man Magoo. Good to see you, brother, man. All right, so let's get into it, right? And let me remind myself of what I'd written in the email. I obviously know what I'm talking about today, but I always like to sort of connect those dots. I write those emails for a reason. I would like to address specifically what is there. All right, so start off with the first sentence that I offered in the email, which is what separates the man who becomes stronger through life's adversities and the man who crumbles before it. Well, I would say that there's two main things that separates men who become stronger or crumble before life's adversities. And we're going to start here. So the first thing is the individual man's current default level of strength. See, in my coaching, one of the basic tenets of my coaching, my philosophy more generally, is this idea of pressure to power, right? Without pressure, there can be no power. Show me pressure, I show you power. Show me power, I show you a trail of pressure. The idea of it is we always want people to be pressured, but we also have to understand that pressure is relative to the individual. An individual man who has been coddled his entire life, lives, in a, aquarium, inner circle, or inner city aquarium his whole life, has been separated from survival instincts, has been separated from so many of the relationship dynamics that man has evolved becoming more effective at. A man who has been insulated from all the needs of men that have come before him tends to be very fragile outside of the aquarium, much like the way a fish, when you take it out of the aquarium and put it on the floor, is also very vulnerable. Reference to a Kill Bill scene right there, if you guys know that. The idea of it is, sometimes when people are raised in a way that they are very insulated, aquariums being very good, for that, what winds up happening is their default state is vulnerable once removed from the protection and the insulation of the aquarium. When you have an individual who has always had the lights on, who has always had food at the store, who has always had heat in the winter, even air conditioning in the summer, this individual is not necessarily primed and ready for adversity. There's a lot of certainty in his life that is based and founded upon artificial environments. Just putting him in a natural setting is a threat to his standard level of certainty. He's not used to being in those situations. A couple days ago here in PA, we had a long, dry spell, burn bans and everything. And then we had this high wind snowstorm. And as expected, lost power. We wound up losing power for around 2 days. And, I've spoken about it in the emails. If you guys are on the emails, you're getting them. But one of the things about losing power was everyone in my family was good. I have a little generator that basically, I could put on a little space heater, and it's got a couple of outlets, and stuff. I don't have a generator for the whole house. That is a philosophical difference that I have with a lot of people, including many good friends of mine who are like, what the fuck are you doing? Your whole house should be on a generator. We'll agree to have different positions. Right? The idea of it is, my job when the power goes out, it's like, I got to make sure nobody freezes to death, right? That's like a thing. And I also don't want to, start putting a campfire in the middle of my living room. I get it, the wood burning stoves and all that. I get it. It's a process. But very, very low level of accommodations do I engage when we lose power. For the most part, everybody's got to fucking deal with it. Yep. There's no sun anymore. Really fucking dark in this house. We got lamps and things like that. But for the most part, hey, you know what? Go to fuck to sleep. Wake up a little early tomorrow. There is a whole segment of society that when power goes out, they lose touch with reality. They don't know what is what. They doubt the nature and reliability of physics when the power goes out. They think they're under some, metaphysical attack when the power goes out, because the amount of certainty that they've built on having that power has transcended their level of awareness. They don't even realize how much they rely upon it. It's taken away. It's like, holy shit, I had no idea. I didn't know how to exist as me without power. So that is an application trying to illustrate this concept of pressure being relative. So the reason, again, I bring that up is because sometimes people are pressured where other people are not. So pressure is a relative term. Now, the function of pressure is to maintain movement of the individual. Without movement, we stagnate. We start existing entirely in the abstraction of our consciousness. This is how depression sets in. This is how paralysis, by analysis, takes root in one's relationship with their life. In order to stay moving, we need to be pressured. As soon as the pressure leaves, we wind up stagnating. We wind up getting stuck in our head because as a species, and I will use the phrase my father always used to say to me, we are so smart, we're stupid. One of the great things about animals is they don't have the burden of rational thought, right? They don't have the burden of a frontal lobe, etc. And that tends to get us in trouble. So when we have this idea of we're going to be able to react productively in an anti-fragile manner, right? With stress, we become more. In order to do that, it starts off with where a man's default level of pressure begins. Because here's the thing. Just like if there's not enough pressure, we stagnate. If there's too much pressure, they melt. So when you have an individual who is now pressured beyond his ability to maintain his identity, he opts out. An application of this overwhelm, changing an individual's relationship with stimulation is the OODA loop, we could say. And I'll use an example before I get into the OODA loop. It still is the OODA loop, but to use an easier example without having to explain the OODA loop. If you have somebody, and you'll see this in fighting, I've run a school for 20 years. I see this all the time when people start learning first how to spar. When they first learn how to spar, it's a fucking video game to them. There's a lot of natural, instincts that they can access where, everybody knows how to make a fist. Everybody knows swing for the guy's face. And maybe, whatever exposure you've had to training up until that point, you might have some other stuff that consciously, you're connected to and you're going to try and engage. But there's a certain point where if you get overwhelmed, and this is different for different people, but in a general sense, when a beginner is overwhelmed, they tend to stop trying to engage reactively to the environment, and they just consciously act of their own doing. What do I mean by that? Sometimes when people enter into this gear, this overwhelmed gear where they sort of downsize their level of awareness, you will literally see people close their eyes and start swinging for the fences. When somebody gets to that point where they are literally closing their eyes, it indicates that they are no longer exposing themselves to the feedback of their environment because that is too overwhelming. So they will shut that down and they will now operate internally, or more generally, they will operate at a lower scale until they are no longer overwhelmed. So when you have an individual who is pressured to the point that he can no longer sustain his ability to function as an individual, he winds up breaking. He winds up melting. He winds up downsizing his relationship with the environment. So pressure is a very relative term, and that is the context. That's the function zone. You guys have been following my stuff. I talk about the function zone for different attributes that individuals have. And when it comes to the resilience or the relationship with pressure, not enough pressure, people stagnate. That's where depression sets in. That's where paralysis, by analysis starts to take root. Too much pressure, you start to overwhelm people. They start to disengage. They start to shrink, right? They start to melt, to break even. In some cases, that concept applied at an extreme, people will have psychotic breaks. People will invent, alter egos, where they're talking to another individual that they're creating in their head because that individual is capable of withstanding the circumstances that they themselves can't. So all sorts of wacky shit starts to happen when pressure gets too much. But here's the kicker. I started, I'll read this sentence again, just again, to keep the context relevant here. What separates a man who becomes stronger through life's adversities and the man who crumbles before it? Well, that's the thing there. If I'm talking to and referring to life's adversities, I'm talking about the things that are required to engage just to live a functional life. I've said the phrase before. Maybe you guys have heard it on one of these talks. You don't want to be the guy that cries when it rains. Because if you're the guy that cries when it rains, for whatever fucking reason, but if you're the guy that cries when it rains, it means that something absolutely not in your control is telling you how to act, is overwhelming you to the point where you have to cathartically relieve yourself in the form of crying. Similarly, there are normal, and I would say normal, I'm not going to say natural, because normal today isn't always natural, right? A lot of artificiality in our lives these days, but normal pressure is something that at default we should be able to engage. So again, when I look at somebody who's either the person that becomes stronger or the person that gets crushed, I'm asking, well, life's regular problems, is that too much for an individual? And now we could debate what should be included in the set of life's normal problems. I'm of the mindset that every man should know how to fight. Every man should know how to swim. Every man should know how to exercise. Every man should know how to, take a bath. I don't know. I'll be here for a while, right? There's a whole bunch of things we got. But some of these things, admittedly, some other people might say, yeah, no, a man doesn't need to do that. And that's fine. I'd agree with them, but then we'd both be wrong, right? The idea of it is, whatever your idea, whatever your assessment of what a man should normally be able to engage, you look at the people around you. Maybe you look at the guy in the mirror and you ask yourself, well, are they going to make the cut? So it starts with the individual that gets stronger through dealing with life's adversities. First and foremost, is strong enough to endure it. Life's adversities is received as pressure. It doesn't break them. It doesn't melt them. In some cases, the normal levels of pressure don't pressure other individuals. Too easy. I was a good test taker in school, right? Little bit of a nerd, not always honor society by any means, because I was also lazy and, I was one of these fucking guys that tried to get away with everything. But I was a good test taker. There would be people in my school, classmates, that would be having nervous breakdowns because of some impending test. Whereas to me, it was always a non-issue. Not that I've never failed a test before, but the idea being, to me, like test taking, it wasn't even the content or the subject matter of the test itself. It was the literal ritual of taking a test would give people anxiety. That was never a thing to me. I didn't overcome it. It was just never a thing. So if I wanted to pressure somebody who had that relationship with test taking, that it was pressurized, that they would go through it, I know that would be a tool in my toolbox to help pressure them, to bring them to another level. Whereas I know there's another person, the person who was more like maybe me in high school, that wasn't really, freaking out about tests. I would have to do a little bit more for that individual, because just taking the test itself isn't going to pressure him if the mission was to pressure him. But you look at these two people, the people that get some anxiety before taking a test, the other archetype of an individual who doesn't feel any anxiety before taking a test. Now what's to be said about the individual that needs medication to take a test, that needs to be in therapy because he has to take tests? We start to see, well, there's this other category where normal expectations, normal adversities, like taking a fucking test in school, is too much for this individual. Well, take that example and the dynamics of the variables involved in it, and now overlay that on a man and his life. Some people worry about the rent. Some people don't give a shit about the rent, whether they have the money or not. Some people don't give a shit about the rent because the rent is so much lower than the money they have that it's a non-issue. But other people, whether they have the money or not, just because the rent's due at the end of the month, they're stressed out over it. It's in the bank account. There's no reason the guy isn't going to get the rent. But just that somebody's going to be waiting for the rent and there's this consequence looming if they don't pay the rent, all of that is in the narrative of their relationship with their lives. It is a dysfunctional way to be. So we started saying, well, the topic of today's talk, the Zen of not being a bitch. So first and foremost, we need to build up a resilience so that life's normal, and that's relative to the society, environment, and ecosystem you live in, but life's normal pressures don't overwhelm you. They don't break you. At default, you are capable of enduring the stresses that people normally must endure. That is one of the beginnings. Then we ask ourselves, well, how then do we continue to improve? And the easy answer against that big, exhaustive backdrop that I just gave, the easy answer is continue to be able to endure higher levels of pressure, which, if your life does not present at default higher levels of pressure, then you will have to ritualize higher levels of pressure. It's the big corporate executive that decides to climb fucking Kilimanjaro, or, the multimillionaire, billionaire even, that decides to start fighting MMA. It's these, I want to go on a safari and shoot a fucking lion, or whatever it is. It's something more. Because usually the people that actually get places in life, they have such a positive relationship with channeling pressure into power that they become a little addicted to it. They become a little reliant upon it. It becomes the norm. Well, how am I going to get more powerful? And then they do whatever they thought of. They see it through. And then at the end of that, it's like, well, how do I now get more powerful? Worth making the distinction when we're talking about power, right? There's an internal power and an external power. Internal power is self-power. I have a program about it. I've been talking about it, for a long time. Self-power is the ability for an individual to maintain the integrity of who he is, despite the pressure and stressors of his environment. He's who he is on a sunny day. He is who he is on a rainy day, in a snowstorm, in a heat wave. When everything's going great, he's going to be him. When everything's going terribly, he's going to be him. All of those applications denotes an individual who has a high degree of self-power, which is the internal power. And then we have the external power, which is the control over circumstances. The external power is not as universal as internal power. The external power is the guy who's very wealthy. He's the guy whose family owns the company. He's the guy who's, his dad's the mayor, right? Or his family founded this town, or whatever creation of a scenario whereby he has influence over the environment is a testament to his external power. Understand that when I use, as I did earlier, this idea of somebody saying, okay, how am I going to get more powerful now? I'm referring specifically, and would advocate for specifically, an increase in internal power. I am not a disciple of the accumulation of external power. Understand that there is a correlation between internal and external power. And put simply, because I don't really have a more eloquent way to put it, right? Put simply, the stronger you are internally, the more that will manifest your external environment. It's just the way it works out. I've conducted myself a certain way over, the course of my adult life. And the way that I've conducted myself has afforded me the fortune, the luck, the privilege of having very powerful allies and friends. It was not the control of my environment that allowed me to connect with them in an alliance. It wasn't how much shit I had. It wasn't who I knew and what I could control, and I was the gateway or the conduit to them achieving something that they thought they couldn't do without my approval, and that created the alliance. No, it was usually, they were like, that guy is tracking some shit that I'm tracking. We got some stuff in common. We should connect. And for the most part, most of my powerful allies and friends came through a process very similar to that. They were working on some stuff. They noticed me and recognized me working on some stuff as I did them. And it was like, yeah, we should hang out. We should connect. We should train. We should, talk. We should, whatever the case is. And that's how powerful people, internally powerful people, tend to find one another. One of the jokes I have with so many of my powerful friends, my powerful allies, who I would say are more powerful than I am. I always joke with them that, if you guys ever had social media, you guys would have so many friends. It's like the recurring joke. I think worth noting is that some of the most powerful people I know want nothing to do with social media. This idea of being friends with strangers, of getting the approval of strangers, because they don't have any business application for this, they're like, why would I ever do that? Man, I completely agree. If I had somebody show up at my house tomorrow saying, some distant uncle that I never knew existed died and left me $1 billion, I promise you I would cancel every single social media account I had, every website I had. You would not be able to find me online. Not that you wouldn't be able to find me. You wouldn't be able to find me online. One of the reasons that I do these talks every week, and not that I'm not grateful for you guys showing up and hanging out with me, but this is something that allows me to spread my message, that allows me to make a living, to do all the coaching and all of the services and things that I'm connected to. This is me basically saying, listen, this is what I'm about. If you want to be connected, this is how you do it. But obviously the impetus is the provision, the providing for my family. But there are people who don't have that same necessity, or they don't have the same tools that I do. The tools that they have allow them to do that without having to do this. And it's worth noting that because they don't need to do this, they understand that, well, like, why would they ever do it? Whereas I have other friends and family who do very well financially, who have incredibly, strong families and circles of friends, but they still find the need to seem cool online. I used that phrase the other day. I like it. It's like, why do you want to seem so cool online? What is that giving you? What is that providing you? Years ago, I had a guy, my man Daryl, he's still connected to me, who gave me what I called in one of the emails I wrote, one of the best compliments I ever got. And he had followed me for a while, followed the podcast that White Boy Pat and I had back in the day, the Pressure Project. He was on my email list. And eventually I had, one of my events. and he came to the event. And it was his first time, hanging out with me and meeting me and hanging out with me in person. And what he said at the end of the weekend was, not that I asked or prompted or anything, it was just a casual conversation. He goes, MC, you are exactly in person who you are online. To me, that was the highest level of compliment, because that's what I aim to do. That's who I aim to be. It's me. This is how I am. Now, yeah, I'm probably in a good mood online more than I am offline. Because if I'm here, I'm making sure my state's good. I'm focused. And, like, don't think I don't yell at fucking, people in society, or I don't get in bad moods or anything like that. I'm working on my ladder like everybody else. But it was very valuable to me that he said who I was in person was who I was online. But now we get back to, what about these people that make every single accommodation they can just to maintain the approval of people who are disconnected from them? It is a built-in removal of security, right? So if we remove security, we say somebody is insecure. And the insecurities that an individual has in modern society, I would say disproportionately now more than ever, is a testament to how much they invest in strangers, how much they invest in the approval of people who are not connected to their tribe. They want people to like them, but the utility of that approval or liking of them by these other people means nothing, has no value aside from its cathartic value. I feel good when strangers say that I'm a good guy. When I make a post online, I feel good when people I don't know like it. I'm not even going to deal right now with the whole idea, and at this point, the ever increasing probability that who's engaging with you is a fucking bot or somebody acting with some, ulterior motive. I had an email I had gotten. This was a few months ago, and I admit this thing I was completely oblivious to, and proudly so. But I'd gotten this email requesting or inviting me to be on this individual's podcast. And I looked at the podcasts and stuff, and I usually don't say no to being on podcasts, but I've changed my tune to that somewhat. If it's not connected with what I'm about, and I can't be bothered. But this individual, he seemed like a good enough guy, but I looked at the podcast and I saw that he only does in-studio shows, and he was on the other side of the country. I'm in Pennsylvania, right? I'm on the East Coast. And I was like, no. So I sent him a message. No, thank you. I appreciate it. And, didn't hear anything, but whatever. A couple of months later, right, I'm on a call with one of my guys, one of the people that I hired to do the different marketing services that I implement. And I had in passing referenced this thing, and he was like, oh, that being on his show is going to cost you like $30,000 or some shit like that. So I was like, what? He's like, oh yeah, like you go on those shows, you're paying big money to be a guest on a show. That's how that works. So of course, after hearing that, it's like, of course that's how it works, right? And I was so glad, because I'm like, oh, so he was presenting himself as somebody who was genuinely interested in me. I said no, thank you. So if he thinks that I'm playing the same game he is, he probably thinks I'm so powerful, right? But meanwhile, I'm just like, I'm not flying to the fucking West Coast. Fuck out of here. There are people who you will engage with online. You have no idea of their ulterior motives. It's a paradox that I had to navigate, and still do. I have, marketing campaigns. I have virtual assistants that message people. And one of the things that I'm very, adamant about is not misrepresenting myself. Now, here's the thing, misrepresenting myself, it's effective. And that is the position that people need to build a relationship with. Sometimes you could get ahead in the aquarium by adopting the artificial strategies. The problem occurs when you are now in a natural environment, and it's like showing up to a construction site and all you brought are your computer equipment. It's like we need jackhammers and fucking saws and drills, and you brought a flash drive and a Bluetooth keyboard, and it's like those tools aren't useful here, right? Or the guy who has a PhD in advanced hostage negotiation, and then he gets robbed by a crackhead like 3 a.m. in a New York City street. It's like, yeah, that shit doesn't work here, dude. And people wind up getting ahead through mastering the artificial mechanisms of the aquarium, oftentimes at the expense and detriment of their natural capabilities. Those natural tools get thrown by the wayside. So what's happening? You get thrown a curveball, everybody fucking collapses. You lose power, people lose their minds. You get fired, people lose their minds. I wake up every morning, and one of the first things that I do, I have a whole ritual, like most people these days, but maybe not most people. Maybe I'm a little biased, but one of the basic foundational rituals of my morning is I remind myself what's important. I remind myself who I am, where I'm at. I remind myself all the opportunities and assets that I have, right? That's the gratitude ritual. These are all the things I have. These are all the opportunities that I have. These are all the people I'm connected to. All the people in my life that are healthy, that are doing well, that are connected to me, that are like, I do a whole inventory of assets and opportunities every day. Why? So I don't wind up being nervous about the fucking bill that's due, or what's going to happen. Oh, is it going to be Trump or Kamala? Or like, what the fuck does, if we're voting on a fucking Tuesday, what the fuck does that have to do with what you're doing on a Wednesday? Concentric circles of influence. It was after a year of the COVID lockdown that all these, the mask fucking maniacs and all these fucking crazy people, it's like so many of them were still fat. And it's like the one thing that the information that was beyond debate, beyond reproach, that was understood and accepted by everybody was that if you were physically healthy, you stood a better chance of being resilient against COVID. So it wasn't about anything other than these people whose aquariums had a big crack put in the side of it were now trying to regain some certainty. And that's when these artificial operators become tyrannical, because they've lost their certainty. So they need to control something. It's not too dissimilar from somebody finding mental catharsis in watching a TV show or in watching a football game or some sports event. It gives them something to focus on, gives them a little bit of control, the ability to root for something, the ability to celebrate for something. If you feel you haven't done anything worthwhile that day, but your team, right, does something good, you could celebrate. We did it. Because you might think you've done nothing. It's an artificial cathartic ritual. And it disconnects people from actually investing the time and energy to become more capable, which is my criticism of it. So when you have individuals that are used to becoming more powerful still is part of their expectation. It's part of what they anticipate the future of their life to resemble, the continued climb of the ladder. So the people who are not strong enough to deal with society's normal problems, life's normal problems, that is when they start wearing the label of being a bitch. the people who at some point stop investing in their self-power and instead desperately invest in controlling external power, they start wearing the label of being a bitch. I said years ago, it's easier to fix your boat than it is to calm the sea. People who try to control their external circumstances without becoming more powerful internally will always be vulnerable. These are the tyrants. I made an example. It might have been last week's talk where I was talking about the guy who, because he can't deal with the stress and pressure of his environment, he shrinks. He's the guy that hates his job, lets the boss yell at him all day, but then he goes home and he yells at his wife. He yells at his kids. He creates this tyrannical level of status in this small bubble of control that he was able to artificially generate. And he makes sure he stays in it. He makes sure everybody else stays in it too. It's like somebody who wins the class presidency as a senior in high school and they don't want to graduate because now they're not president anymore. It's a problem. And it's what happens when bitches try to control the outside world, the external environment. They're interested in becoming more powerful externally without ever investing in progress internally. Let's see what's going on here. John Wiley, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. Super Honky, my favorite YouTube account. Oh, good to see you. Monk, what's up, brother man? 12 pack, staying on mission. Smash that like button, y'all. That's what I'm talking about. Jamie writes, I wonder how many drug addicts or alcoholics there have been who have been exposed to massive degrees of stress but can't reproduce those levels and maintain and remain limp as a result. I'm assuming this is a continuation. Sometimes you meet those people who seem useless. Limp elastic bands. I don't know if there was supposed to be a space there, but it works as a word. Until shit goes south and when you see them come alive, until the pressure is no longer at the level, they wilt again. I like that. That's actually a very, very insightful take on it, and I agree. You have individuals that they're only good in an emergency. They're only good when the pressure's on. Some people, I would say, are more like this than others in that I admittedly have always been somebody who has operated very well under pressure, but sometimes when the pressure releases, I get distracted very easily. So what have I had to learn how to do? I've had to learn to fill my bandwidth. I know if there's a day that I ain't got nothing going on, what I got going on is getting distracted, getting into trouble, wasting time, wasting energy. I have to fill my time. When the heat's on, I come alive. I feel that way. I wouldn't say that I'm a limp elastic drug addict, but I would say certainly that the phenomenon that was described in that observation is certainly one that I'm familiar with. And I would say that, and maybe this is a little bit of a distinction from what Jamie, you had specifically said, but I would say this isn't a product of a reaction to stress. It's a product of having a bandwidth that has too much slack in it when compared to the expectations of one's day. Years ago, I said a hater, right? People who hate online, or offline, whatever. Haters are people, first and foremost, that ain't got enough going on. If I wanted to spend all my day shitting on people that I think should be shit on, I'd have a packed schedule. But I don't have time for that. I do not have time for that. And that's what it comes down to. Plenty of people talk shit about me online. Every single time I see it, I'm like, good. That means they ain't doing a fucking thing with themselves. Anything that I would have ever wished on them, it seems like they're doing to themselves. All day long. Right? So there is something to be said about the responsibility to fill their bandwidth. And it's relative. It's relative. Some people have bigger bandwidths. Well, it means you got more shit to do. Monk writes, I don't care what people think. I use social media to talk to other martial artist friends across the world that I know in real life. Uh, are you using fucking acronyms? Like, I don't know what that means. IGNF. I give no fucks. Got it. Ding, ding, ding. About what people think of me, except for very few. And it's funny. Years ago, I wrote a whole email series on why everybody should get off of social media. And I always advocate for two reasons for being on social media. One, business, right? It's lead generation. It's finding people who could take advantage of the opportunities and values that you offer. And then the other thing is people who you know in the real world. People who you know in the real world. If I know somebody in the real world and I see them on Facebook or Instagram or something, like, this is a way to connect with somebody I know. Right? If you're vulnerable to being catfished, like, you're a fucking sucker. Right? So I agree with you there, Monk. Chuhan Tom in the house. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Aaron writes, it's amazing how many people you still see walking around with a mask that are just fat as fuck. Like, I'm sorry, but you got way more. So I'm of the mindset that some of the fat people you still see with masks, we should check to see if there's food in it. Because I've never owned a horse, but I know those horses have those things that they eat in. And that might be what they're rocking at this point. The beginning of COVID, there was a friggin' psycho at the store around my age. I'm not old, I'm 33. And I just basically had to walk around to get behind her in line. She went into a total holier than thou bitch mode about the fact that I wasn't wearing a mask. And she wasn't even fat, just retarded, right? They were in abundance. Monk says, keyboard warriors are cowards. Absolutely. Well, think of it this way. I would say, here's the thing about keyboard warriors. I wouldn't call them cowards. I said absolutely, but I'll take that back. I understand the sentiment, and I agree with the sentiment. They're bitches. Cowards is something a little bit more distinct, right? So a coward, as I would say succinctly put by one of my sons years ago, is when a person's too scared to do their job. I don't think keyboard warriors are too scared to do their job. What I do say, however, is that keyboard warriors are believers in asymmetric warfare. They are the guerrilla warriors, right? The guerrilla soldiers of the internet. They understand that they're not powerful. They understand that they cannot confront people directly. So they use a means by which they think they could affect a result, a consequence. They think they could ruin your day if they say the right thing and send it to you. Our job, our obligation, I would say, is to build up a resilience to where we're unaffected by it, right? So keyboard warriors, we have to understand, like, it's okay when weak people act weakly toward you. And we should never be offended by the actions of people outside of our tribe. And I'll give you an example of this, right? And I've run this mental exercise, a bunch of times before. If you're with your wife, you're walking down the street, guy says, hey, your wife's a whore. It's like, you ask most people that, and I've done this in events and ask guys this. It's like, what would you do? And then it's funny because I set them up. If anybody, I hope nobody going to my event in January is watching this, because I might use this then. A lot of times they're expecting me to see if they want to know how big the guy is or whatever, right? So they go, I'm gonna fight him and defend my wife's honor. I go, all right. Ask another guy. Same thing. I'm gonna fight him. Fight him, all right. And sometimes you get a guy that says, well, I might not fight him. I'm definitely going to address it. All right. I don't give a fuck if they care about how big and small the guy is. Like, to me, I think that's actually a practical question. If you're going to fight him, well, how big is he? Because then what are you fighting him with? Like, little motherfucker, you might slap around. Big dude, you might have to stick him a couple times. But anyway, What I follow up with is, well, what if there's 20 of them? And they're all in unison are going, your wife's a whore. Your wife's a whore. At some point, the perceived power of that group that is calling the wife a whore becomes so significant that it passes a line where his decision to do one thing turns into doing another. And when it changes, when it goes past that line, at some point he goes, well, I'm just going to take her and keep walking because what am I going to do? And then it's, well, why didn't you do that with it when it was just one guy? Oh, because, my wife's honor. Like, this guy isn't in your tribe. He's a stranger. Maybe he's a crazy person. Maybe he's somebody that was hired by somebody that hates you, one of your enemies. See if you can get him to fight you. And then that's his way of jamming you up by sending some dude to call your wife a whore and you react. These are the ways you have to think. But only if you're worth a shit. If you're fucking useless, if you have no friends, if you have no power, internal or external, do whatever the fuck makes you feel good. I mean, if you're somebody that just wants to lash out and do what feels good, you're no different than a fucking stray dog licking his balls in the middle of the fucking day. Like, do you, boo-boo? I got shit to lose. You know how many people did not get assaulted by me over the last 18 years because I got kids? It's like, no. You got to fucking food in the fridge. Got to fill the fridge. I can't fuck this dude up. Got to fill the fridge. Got to make money. Got to support. It's just a matter, I guess, of what you're connected to consciously and unconsciously. Consciously, we could all come to this decision. It's like, yeah, well, we can't fucking smack people around, get arrested. You got shit to do. I got kids to feed. But then the right guy says the right thing at the wrong time, and all of a sudden, the fucking werewolf pops out looking for fucking vengeance. Fucking up. So, the Zen of Not Being a Bitch. I think I have given it a pretty good go. I think we sorted some shit out. I think I'll end it there. I appreciate you guys being here. I'm always grateful for the company. You guys know I'm here next week, every Wednesday at noon. If you guys are not getting my emails, again, masterchimletter.com. The link is in the description. Like, subscribe, do all that other stuff. But if you don't, that's okay. I'll still be here next week. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.